Everyone, so it's been a while, a year and a half to 2 years, but I'm back and I'm planning on making videos regularly again. So this first video is going to be all of the books I've read so far this year. I'm not going to be saying too much about each book, but just some general thoughts because I have read a few good books this year so far. Also, just to kind of let you know what to expect if you're so kind as to watch more than just this video, which I definitely appreciate, is I plan on having a video from now through November about every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There will be a video on Halloween because I want to do my wrap up on the last day of the month. And in the week of Dewey's, instead of the video that would go up on that Friday, there'll be the Dewey's vlog on Sunday. That's the plan. If I somehow can't manage that many, I will definitely be posting at least one video, and it will likely be the video that goes up on Mondays. So let's get into all of the exciting books that I've read so far this year. And we're not off to a great start because I just bumped the camera. So hopefully it's in a similar setting at least. We're coming back. So the order I'm going to do these in is from first read to most recently read. So I started my year off with the third book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and that is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. I think this is my second favorite of the series. I can't get into much, but this one, the main character is following a different crime that has just been committed in her community, and she is doing these podcasts live as it's going down, which is very fun. It was more intense than the other two for sure, and I did not see the big major mystery twist coming, but I really enjoyed it, and it was a lot of character growth, and just seeing how much she cares for her friends and family was amazing. But it's a great YA thriller. If you have not started this series, at the very least, I would pick up the first book, and it does end at a point where if you didn't want to continue with this series, you could read the first one as a standalone. The next book I finished was Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott, and this is a retelling of the Russian folklore myth of Baba Yaga. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Oh, I forgot to tell you, so the last book, the As Good as Dead, I gave 4.5. So I gave this one 3 stars. I really liked the vibes it gave. And I liked the brother-sister dynamic. And one of the characters copes with PTSD, so that is a trigger. Just warning you now that this might not be great. But I thought it did it very well. And it also captured grief well. But the pacing was off into a way that it took away from some of the enjoyment of the book. So it starts off at a decent slow pace, which I enjoyed, and then it ramps up a bit too fast on the way to the climax. But if you're looking for a good retelling, I did enjoy this one. The next book is actually a nonfiction book, and this is $2 a Day, Living on Almost Nothing in America. I believe this was published in about 2015, so this is old, and not too much has changed in the United States, to be honest, except that $2 now does not go anywhere near what $2 went back in 2015. So this was a gut-wrenching read for me, but it's even more gut-wrenching knowing that level of poverty and what it would be today. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I gave this a 4.0. It was extremely educational. I highly recommend it. And it takes away from a lot of the stigma around poverty and the people who would like to use government assistance, but it's often not available, and the limited amount of government assistance that is available in the States. There is a stigma that people overuse it. And there are some abusers of the system, but the reality is the vast majority of people who would need these these social safety nets aren't even eligible for them, which is really sad. Or two, can't get it because there's so many hoops you have to jump over, and if you already aren't making money, you likely don't have internet, or going to a government office and doing that in person is taking away from your ability to potentially seek work, or if you're already working a minimum wage job, that little bit of money you are bringing in, going to apply for one of these programs, because most often government buildings are only open Monday through Friday up to 4 o'clock, would be next to impossible. So it is heartbreaking, to say the least. And it goes into why people do the things they do out of desperation. And you should be able to get this from a local library in the United States. It was pretty well distributed, and if it's not at yours, I would look into interlibrary loan. The interlibrary loan system in the United States is fantastic, and in Texas, most libraries will do interlibrary loan within a library within Texas for free. I'm not 100% certain about other states, but I have used the interlibrary loan system and been able to get things from out of state, but sometimes they charge you the shipping fee. But that's a couple dollars because they're shipping it media mail. And so it's $2 to $3 as opposed to buying a book full price at close to $30. The next book was The Black House by Carol Johnstone, which I gave a 3.0. This was a disappointment. I thought this was going to be absolutely fantastic, and it fell just short. I still enjoyed it, but not as much as I was hoping. This is set on Ireland in the fall going into winter, or in the deep of winter going into spring. I can't quite remember. But essentially this is a mystery, I don't even want to say suspense, but it's a slower mystery set on this remote island, tiny population, so everybody knows everything. And it starts out as this young girl went there when she was 4 years old, claiming to be somebody who had been reported dead or disappeared, to be the reincarnate. She comes back in her later life as a journalist trying to uncover who this person was that she believed so strongly at 4 years old she is the reincarnation of. This was another one where the pacing fell short. In mysteries, suspense, and thrillers, it is extremely hard to get the pacing right in these books. And this had a lull in the middle, which was a bit too slow. But I will say, if you're reading this on a cold and rainy day, maybe that slower pace would be okay, because the book is so atmospheric with that doom and cold weather and wet vibe that it might just work. So I recommend this, but do it when the weather's right. Then I read The Lost and the Moment and Found, which is the 8th book in the Wayward Children series. You do not have to read any of the other books in this series to read this one. And this one follows a girl who ends up stumbling across a door. She goes into the door, and it's this shop of things where the lost things go. And I really enjoyed this. This is one of the better ones in the series. I gave it a 4.0, and I really liked the discussion of informed consent. These novels are really short, and they have great minority and disability and identity inclusions, and so I think you'll find a portion of yourself, regardless of who you are, within a character somewhere in the series. So I highly recommend, but this is one of the standalones, and so it is a good introduction to the series if some of the other ones didn't sound particularly interesting to you. Then I read Decluttering at the Speed of Light, Winning Your Never-Ending Battle with Stuff by Dana K. White. I read this early in the year when I was doing my first big decluttering project. I'm planning on doing another one this fall. But I gave it a 2.5. She didn't really say anything groundbreaking, and I didn't expect that, but at the same point, her method definitely wasn't going to work for me because I needed to just do a big, quick purge. I couldn't do these small little one shelf a day. I was too overwhelmed that I just needed to get rid of things quickly. And so there's that. But I was in general disappointed, but it is right for somebody. Especially if you're overwhelmed by doing such a big project, the idea of only having to do one drawer at a time might be appealing to you. The next one was Lunar Love by Laura Kung Jensen. I gave it 2.5. Now, my rating may be deceiving. This book follows a woman who runs a matchmaking shop in the US following traditional Chinese matchmaking, and particularly with the focus of the Chinese zodiac. And it's a romance. It's set leading up to the Lunar New Year. It's a cute romance, but I put it down for several weeks and didn't pick it back up. Like, I ended up having to get it again from the library. And I think the pacing was just a little bit off to me, but it is cute. And if you don't like a book with a lot of like sexy times, then I might recommend this romance, which is my preference actually. I prefer my like romance more on like the cute side. But yeah, something was just off about it. Not my favorite. Then I read, and this was fantastic, I read Memphis by Tara M. Stringfeld. I gave it a 5-star. It is my first 5-star in quite a while, and I love this. Now, a disclaimer. The author had approached reviewers in a way that's inappropriate. However, I personally tend to give debut authors a bit more of a pass on that, because I find that sometimes an author's debut book is a little bit closer to home, and so they take their criticism personally more than like the criticism of the work itself. They take it as a criticism on themselves, as the person, if that makes sense. And so we'll see what happens with her second book, but that is just something, if you're not willing to engage in books where authors have crossed that boundary, just a fair warning. But this book, I want to say, is like essential reading. It should be taught in schools. It is phenomenal. It is a multi-generational story following 3 generations of African-American women in and around Memphis. And it captures the southern heat extremely well. It was engaging. This is very much a character-centric novel. You get to know the characters really well. They're very fleshed out, and there's quite a bit of development. This book talks about a lot of trauma that particularly African-American women in the South experience. These traumas include, and these are just trigger warnings, sexual assault of a child, gang violence, racism, domestic abuse, death of loved ones, and many other trigger warnings. So definitely look into that if you need them. But the story is more of one on love and forgiveness and moving through, rather than the story focusing on the trauma itself, which I loved. It's such a heartwarming story. And I liked that each character was flawed, and they weren't perfect, and you're not going to agree with every decision they made, but you could understand why they made the decisions they made. It's beautifully written, the language wise. Moving on to Homesick by Jennifer Croft. This is, in the US, it's published as nonfiction memoir. However, this is definitely is fictionalized. So maybe like a autobiographical fiction book. I give this 2.0. It follows a translator from her childhood up until the point where she is today, and her sister. And trigger warning for extreme childhood disease. It just wasn't, to me, I didn't like the writing. It was written in vignettes. and two, just the way that the younger sister was treated by the older one, the one telling the story, I didn't quite like, and it just really wasn't for me. It's a short book, but I had to like force myself to get to the end of it. The next book I read was The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I gave this one 3.5. This is a fictionalized account of, I believe, a poem. Like My Last Duchess, I think, was the poem that it was based off of. And I enjoyed this. I just wish that I didn't particularly like the ending, one, and then two, there were some portions where I wish we got more in detail, and then there were other portions where I felt like we could shorten. But this follows a young woman in like the 15 or 1600s. She's a precocious child. She's not easily settled in the traditional female roles of the day. She wants more power and independence. And her sister ends up passing away, and she gets betrothed to who her older sister's husband was to be, because she passed away prior to the marriage. And she gets passed along to this man who has never been able to produce an heir. And so she's chosen as the wife to predominantly just produce the heir. What I really liked was seeing an independent woman and the things they did in that time. And I loved her relationship with her nurse and how much her nurse went out of the way to protect her and to do everything she could for her, given the lack of power that the nurses really had in the time. Slight pacing issues, but overall a good book. I am not somebody who has a great history with graphic novels, but I've always wanted to get more into them. I do appreciate good art. And as a recommendation of Giselle, who changed her channel name to Giselle's Book Garden, I ended up picking up The Tea Dragon Society by Kate O'Neill. I've only read the first one so far, and this was just charming and heartwarming, and a story of love and friendship, and taking care of these little dragons that grow teas on their heads. And it's cozy and warm, and if you need something that just can make you happy, I would pick this up, and the art is adorable. Then I read Stoneblind by Natalie Hayes. I gave this a 4.0, and this is a retelling of Medusa from multi POVs, from the gods to Medusa's sisters, and I think Medusa herself has a POV, and it humanizes Medusa more, and it explains why Medusa is the way she is and how much love the Gorgons had for her. The Gorgons in the Greek myths were these monstrous women, and this made them more human, and it made you question who are the real villains in the Greek and even Roman mythology, because these men are these heroes, and it's showing that the men were not heroes. They were these awful people to women, particularly. And you have these women who are being told as villains, and in reality they're victims. And I really enjoyed it. I have not picked up Madeline Miller's first book, The Song of Achilles, but I really want to. But if you liked Circe, which I had issues with, this to me is better than Circe. And then the last book I finished was another graphic novel, and this is Salt Magic by Hope Larson and illustrated by Rebecca Mock. I gave this one 3 stars. I thought the illustrations were beautiful. I love the pastel and candy-like illustration style. It was a very interesting mix of like creepy darkness but cozy and whimsical all at the same time. I'd complained about pacing for other books, but this one was well paced and read very much like a fairy tale of today. So it's not as dated as some of the former fairy tales. This could easily be turned into a movie with a very independent female lead. The big problem I had with the graphic novel is that the ending fell short. There were so many questions left unanswered and I just needed a bit more, and that's why I gave it the rating that I did. So these are the 13 books that I've read so far this year. It's not a lot. It's by far not my best reading year. However, I am hoping to have a good push here in the fall. I love mystery thrillers. I love fantasy, and I a lot of times have a pretty good reading year in the summer, but the summer was just absolutely brutal here in Texas. Temperatures as high as like 107 where I live. No rain. So I'm really hoping for a good fall. I can't wait to sit on my patio at night and read, and I really enjoy having the lights on and getting a nice, you know, crisp reading weather. We are at least a month out from that, but the temperatures are more manageable. And I would love to know what books you read this year that you've really liked. That way I can find some great books for the fall. And I will see y'all later. Bye, y'all.